Hello. Our story begins inside the halls of the Jedi Temple in 56 BBY. Jedi Master Dooku entered through the hangar bay and found his old friend, Sifo-Dyas, who was walking with his master, Lene Kristana. Sifo-Dyas wasn't yet a Jedi Master, and wouldn't become one for another several years, but his knighthood was completed, and he kept close with his teacher. Sifo-Dyas and Master Kristana turned to see Master Dooku and asked how things were going. Dooku shrugged his shoulders with a grin, telling them that it was as successful as it could be. He told them that there was only so much he could do. The mission he returned from was a negotiation he had on Kesh. The situation was in wild space, so it technically wasn't the biggest issue in the galaxy. However, the council believed he would be a better fit for the task. Being young and vibrant, it was a good fit for Yoda's prized pupil, the last student he would ever teach. Dooku recollected the people from Kesh, and their joy over the completion of the negotiations. It was a civilized planet, but because it was so displaced from the wider galaxy, they needed assistance mediating a little dispute. On a galactic level, it didn't look like a big deal, but the balance between royals and commoners was important, and with Dooku's guidance, it helped the people avoid an all-out struggle with each other. Master Dooku asked the two Jedi how things were going with them, or if there was anything exciting going on for them. They looked to each other, and Master Kristana spoke first, expressing that all the excitement was being held in the High Council. Dooku's expression was as open-mouthed as, "Oh?" To which Sifo-Dyas informed his friend that perhaps they could speak of their own little discoveries afterwards. He would have much more excitement inside the chambers of the High Council. Dooku thanked them, with a bit of confusion wound around in his mind. Master Kristana and Sifo-Dyas bowed to Dooku, and he did the same before making his way towards the chambers. The temple was as peaceful as ever, an era with no war, not long from the Gilded Age of the Republic. Sure, the Jedi were shedding their white and golden robes, but the High Republic era hadn't come to a complete end, right? Maybe not. Dooku didn't think about doom and gloom all that much, but even to him it felt like the era of the High Republic, an era where the Republic thrived more than ever before, had come to its bitter end. The corruption within the Jedi Council was starting to become present as the Republic lost even more positive presence in the wider galaxy. There was a number of reasons for this, but Dooku had his theories. He obviously didn't want to see it come to that, but maybe there was nothing stopping it. The Jedi Master stepped into the elevator and closed it, pressing his hand to his beard and waiting for the elevator to rise. At 46 years old, he knew how to play the politics of the council, and even those of his dear old master. Though he was unaware if this was something wrong he said, or did, or perhaps another mission for him to go on. Truthfully, the number of things the council could say were limitless. The doors opened and he stepped into the chambers. He looked from left to right. There were all familiar faces in the High Council. Terra Sunube, Yoda, Oppo Rancisis, Pali Daparshan, Yarael Poof, Katiri, even Peel, Yaddle, Plo Koon, and Jocasta Nu. They all smiled at him. He walked in, noting how two masters were missing. Grandmaster Yoda spoke up to his former student, informing him that the collective minds of the Council believed that he was worthy of becoming a Jedi Council member, if he wanted to follow such a path, that is. There were only 2 rotational spots in the Council that were being replaced, hence why there were 2 missing members at the moment. Dooku was genuinely shocked. He didn't honestly know how to feel about the ascension to the High Council. Master Daparshan spoke up, suggesting that while this undertaking seemed heavy-handed, the Council would grant him time to consider the choice he made. From next to Yoda, Master Katiri spoke up, confirming Pali's statement, but going a step further, expressing how Dooku's eager and determined mind would be a great fit within the realm of the Council. Their excitement for him to be with them could not be understated. However, as a Jedi, he should trust the Force in his decision moving forward. Dooku smiled and nodded his head. He turned back to Grandmaster Yoda and expressed his gratitude for the opportunity. He said that he would meditate on this opportunity and return to them with an answer, bowing his head and then leaving. Dooku's surprise could not be understated. He was genuinely impressed with the Council's openness to bringing him on board to their ranks. It was certainly something he was never expecting to hear, especially not in that meeting. He had his genuine excitement for the opportunity, having always wanted to be on the Council just as any other Jedi. However, there was an issue of disagreeing heavily with the politics of the Council. They were far too loyal to the Republic for his own liking. The Jedi Master made his way to the garden of the temple and looked at the tree. He thought of his former apprentice as a young boy, running up to the tree and pointing to it with excitement. Every time he saw the tree, he was enamored with it. Dooku looked for that same energy in this moment, hoping to cultivate his heart to follow his mind. He closed his eyes and felt the breeze breach the walls of the temple and fall into the courtyard. His cape blew gently and then it slowed down. Dooku focused into the Force and called out for answers from the greater universe. There was something that he couldn't describe about his choice. What would he do? What could he do? As he felt the waves in the Force, he became enamored with the idea of what he could do if he were a council member. Dooku opened his eyes and looked behind him, his eyes scaling the main tower of the Jedi Temple, leading to the council chambers themselves. A small grin crossed his face. If he joined their ranks, he could become a voice of reason within their chambers. The Jedi weren't lost yet. Their redemption had only just begun. Dooku thought to himself as he started back towards the interior of the temple. He had a number of theories regarding the Jedi Order, and even those regarding his dear old master. Dooku didn't fully believe it yet, but he considered the idea that Yoda was holding the Jedi Order back. He had been at the helm of the Council for a number of centuries. He could have become complacent in those years. There was a period where he was one of 3 Grand Masters. There was even a period where he was regarded as the Chosen One, having such a high midichlorian count. However, those ideas have subsided over the years due to the fact that there were no Sith, and the Jedi seemed to maintain the balance over the era of the High Republic and the centuries before it. So Dooku held out hope that his master wasn't the cause of this. Instead of going to the council chambers with his decision, he went back to his personal quarters. Of course, he wanted to keep the council on edge just because, well, he was him. Anyways, it had been a long day and a long journey from Kashyyyk to Coruscant. Time to sleep in his own bed. As Dooku was sleeping, he had a couple of dreams. Nothing too drastic. Dooku always had vibrant and detailed dreams, so this wasn't uncommon. Though by the middle of the night, he was driven from his sleep with a night terror. Something that shouldn't have come from within him. He sat up, and instead of fearing that night terror, he closed his eyes and lowered himself to his bed, opening up a small book next to it, and he pulled a pen from the table and began to draw what he was seeing. When the drawing was completed, he opened his eyes and wrote down some notes before falling back asleep. His hope was to return to the dream he exited from, but he never came back to it. He woke up hours later in the morning, having had nothing relating to the night terror and a couple of other dormant dreams. Despite being disoriented and not an early riser, he turned to his bedside with one eye open and looked at the notebook. What he saw confused him, but he read over it, and over it, and over it again until everything registered, where letters properly arranged themselves and the drawing became clear. How odd. What he had drawn seemed to be a duo of Sith, and the notes he wrote were the idea or the theory that a couple of Sith were trying to conjure up the Force to create a dyad. It was an old Sith legend of sorts. Dooku knew of it because of his closeness with Master Kastana. She and Sifo-Dyas had a habit of picking up Sith relics. One of them was from an unknown Sith planet. They never found out the name of the planet, but it was from the Sith world of Exegol. What the artifact held were the secrets of the doctrine of the dyad. According to Master Kastana's understanding, from what Master Jocasta discovered, the doctrine was established by the Sith Lord, Darth Bane, the apparent last of the Sith, the one who created a legacy of the Rule of Two, before their ancient religion died out. However, there was never a true confirmation of the Sith obliteration. Dooku's awareness of this doctrine led him to believe that perhaps another stumbled upon their ideology and was corrupted. If not that, then the Sith had survived the entire time and were preparing for rebirth. The idea behind this doctrine is that the Sith would create a dyad between the master and apprentice within this Rule of Two. With said dyad, they'd be able to use the dark side of the Force to its maximum potential. There are few beings in the galaxy with unstoppable potential in the Force. The Chosen One, Chosen Ones which were not in essence comparable to the Chosen One, and a dyad in the Force. Something about this unnerved Dooku, so much so that he considered denying the request to join the High Council. That choice was one that couldn't be undone, being that it was very, very uncommon for the Council to reach out to someone more than once. Despite how talented a Jedi might be, or good they might do, once they extended their offer, they don't have a reason to do it again. One could see this as passive-aggressive. Others could see it as them respecting the Jedi's choice. Dooku paced his room for a little before he left, finding his choice and then making his way to the council chambers, where he would take a seat alongside the brightest minds of the Order, including that of his master. Yoda was full of pride to see yet another one of his students join him on the council. He had many students, thousands of them actually, not all of them he trained to knighthood, but Padawans he trained to knighthood was different than just younglings he trained in a session or two, and many of those individuals he trained to knighthood joined him over the years. He was full of pride to see his final individual student join him on the High Council. Dooku's tenure with the Council would be one that would have him understanding the politics and the mind of the Council more than he ever did. Despite being Yoda's student, He knew how to separate life on the Council from life as a master. Having had centuries of experience doing it, it wasn't hard to do with Dooku, especially since he had no insight to Yoda's life as a Grand Master. Dooku never got any insider details, which in a way was good, but it also encouraged Dooku to be more curious than not. Anyway, Dooku could see the change coming, and he wanted to avoid the failures of those before him. Disgraced Jedi Master Eula Braylon had a son, which forced the Council to remove her from her seat. Dooku never thought that would happen to him, but the Council could become adversarial with those who didn't see eye to eye with them. So instead of picking a fight, he stayed quiet, mimicking the newest Khel-Dor Jedi Master since Lenya Kabe-Oyu from the High Republic era. While she never served on the High Council, she was highly respected as a Jedi Master during her time. It was nice to see Plo doing the same, at least that was in Dooku's mind. Master Dooku was filled with information, mostly due to his instructor, but also because of his own interest in learning. He wanted to know everything there was to know, and so with each session, he was as quiet as a loft cat. He looked to each of his peers, each of them bringing up new sides to each discussion each time they changed topics. Some played devil's advocate, and others wholeheartedly agreed. Dooku played it safe, which wasn't uncommon for new council members. He wanted to know how these debates went before getting into them. This did surprise many on the council, being that Dooku was an extraordinary debater, but they let him go at his own pace. Months went by where Dooku barely said any words, the only ones he spoke being aye or nay, to help move forward certain motions stuck in gridlock. When he finally decided to speak up, one would think it'd be a conversation regarding close ties to the Republic, and how they were getting increasingly closer to them. But no, Dooku thought it'd be a good idea to bring up his voice in a conversation over the botanical gardens inside the temple. They were discussing where they should bring in the coming season's supply and whatnot. Whatever it was, Dooku was pressed. His observance allowed him to be prepared when a real decisive conversation came up. The discussion came around the current Chancellor's decision to pull the Republic even further back from the Outer Rim. Dooku completely disagreed with this, even though it was long overdue. The Republic hadn't been in the Outer Rim since the Starlight Beacon failed. Everyone knew that. However, the Republic was defining its lines again. The Chancellor was also supporting the banking systems more, but this meant pushing more power towards the banking clans and Damask holdings. Dooku had a couple of harsh standings for both discussions. He knew that pushing back against the Republic would be hypocritical of the Council, being that the Council, under Yoda's guidance, first suggested pulling from the Outer Rim when Starlight fell. It would be hard to undo that or even push back against the Republic for redrawing their lines around now newly considered Outer Rim planets. On the flip side, giving more power to the corporations was something Dooku wanted to stand against, and so he did. He had a lot more leverage with this than the other topic. While he didn't support the notion of the Jedi being involved in business with the Republic, he also didn't want to see the Republic fail. If the system became more corrupt than it already was, then it meant that the Jedi would become corrupt, forcing the entire thing to fall apart on the galaxy who needed it. This would hurt people who relied on the system. Dooku stood for those people and expressed that the Jedi should too, but the issue is, it wasn't brought before the Council as something that could be acted on. The Council was just addressing the issue because they wanted to see how they would proceed forward in an event that something like this might come up in the future. The Council, including Masters Yoda, Rancisis, Poof, Katiri, Peel, Plo, and Jocasta, were in agreement that they should agree with the movements of the Republic and its Chancellor. On the flip side of that were Sanube, Departian, Dooku, Yaddle, and the only rotational seat that was left open, considering Dooku took up a lifetime seat. He could step down if he wanted, but he didn't think he'd lead the Council. Dooku was outraged. He stood up with passion in his throat. He told the Council that it was their duty to protect the people of the Republic. While they couldn't change what was being done inside the Senate chambers, they couldn't ethically stand for these decisions. They would negatively impact the collective people of the galaxy. The Council was all jolted back by the sudden movement, to which Dooku lowered his voice and apologized, referencing his care for those without a voice, before seating himself down again. The silence was deafening until Dooku spoke up once more and told them all that it was their duty as Jedi to be concerned for the people of the galaxy. He admitted that he didn't have to divulge into his own feelings regarding how the Jedi and Republic were bad for each other, especially intertwined, but he emphasized, and he wanted to, that if the Republic continued selling its soul, then it could allow other powers like the Trade Federation to gain more power in the Senate. The Jedi, especially of old, were dumbfounded as they looked at Dooku. He expressed that in holding back from saying something, at the very least, was borderline unethical. Dooku wasn't suggesting standing against the Republic, but as a counter, one the collective minds could handle. They could suggest the Republic not give itself over, especially not to the banking clans or Damask holdings. The issue the Council had, especially of old, is that the Republic wasn't doing that. They were just opening up their debt ceiling and eliciting a little more wiggle room within the Senate chambers. To the Council, this wasn't a big deal. Other corporations and businesses had been doing this since Chancellor Lina So of the High Republic. Dooku was so displeased with this reaction. He knew he wouldn't get anything less. Master Kateri, who was typically much more on the side of the Jedi Code, and therefore the Republic, spoke up. She suggested to Dooku that if he or another Jedi could find cause for the Republic to not trust the banking clans or even Damask holdings, then perhaps there was potential for something to be done about it. Otherwise, nothing would be, or could be done. She admitted that the Council stood with the Republic, but if the Republic was found making decisions improper for the people of the galaxy, then perhaps they should do something about it. This did enrage Dooku to a degree, so he brought up the incident he and his student encountered with Senator Dagonet. Master Kateri recalled it, despite it being done before her time with the Council. She understood his gripe. However, an isolated incident didn't make the entire system corrupt. Dooku needed to understand that the Council couldn't forego its connection to the Republic because of an isolated incident. This was backed by Yarael Poof, who said some remarks in agreement. Dooku could rip the two of them apart, and he nearly did, but he expressed nothing more than agreeing to disagree. He almost regretted joining the Council now. After he finished his little compromise, he expressed that he would like to take Master Castana and Sifo Dyas with him on a mission to Scipio, and then from there, perhaps Megiddo, being that Damask holdings had some history on the planet. The Council agreed that he be allowed to do it, but they had to be sure that their approach was quiet. No reason to drum up any superstitions about the Republic and or the Jedi trying to get greedy with the intergalactic banking clans or Damask holdings. It was understood, and Dooku left the Council chambers relatively unhappy. As he went to find his two allies, trouble was brewing across the galaxy. Darth Plagueis the Wise, the Dark Lord of the Sith, was greatly disappointed by the continued failure of the Sith's millennium-old plan. Plagueis tried to form a dyad with his extremely talented student. It just didn't work for him. Not for nothing, it didn't really work ever, because it was unnatural to force a dyad into existence. This ripple and ritual caught Dooku's attention. He felt it through the Force, but he also had no reason to believe the Sith were up to anything, considering they'd been extinct for millennia, apparently. Plagueis looked at his student, who despite being only 28 years old, was weakened from this. Forcing the creation of a dyad was extensive and it took a lot of energy, even from young Palpatine. Plagueis told his student to go and rest. They'd begin the next leg of their potential plan. The Dark Lord of the Sith had been thinking about different ways to seize control over the Republic and wipe out the Jedi. Plagueis knew that to do such instrumental damage to a generational system would take years of work. He had his family holdings, which were a great help. However, he was trying to figure out other plans. He just hadn't gotten around to what he wanted yet. One plan was the inclusion of the Nile, the Hutt cartel and the various crime families that were beginning to take a threshold in the Outer Rim. However, even with them all united, the Republic was far too powerful for them, especially with the Jedi. On top of all these ill-conceived plans were Plagueis' own visions and dreams for a life he feared he might never see. His obsession with immortality drove him mad. It was a concept not yet introduced to his student, not because he didn't trust Palpatine, but because he wasn't finished with it. As the young Sith apprentice ushered himself into the other room, Plagueis returned to his laboratory to continue conjuring ideas. And there had to be a way to get this right. Maybe a Jedi from the interior of the temple, a saboteur. But which Jedi would betray their order? Despite being an outsider, he knew of Eula Braylon and some of the more rebellious Jedi of this era. But not even the shameful Master Braylon would betray her order. Sure, having a child while being a Jedi was a bad look, but it didn't elicit her resentment from her brothers and sisters. It felt like a lost cause all over again, a consistent struggle for the new Sith. How could they compete with the Jedi, and how could they stop them? They were seemingly unstoppable, with an order that continued to grow. Surely by the time Palpatine was a Sith Lord, they'd have 12,000 members or more. What a terrible fate for the galaxy. If only the Sith could force the Jedi into a war, with not the Republic but someone else. Somehow, the Sith could get their numbers down, but getting the Jedi into a war was unlikely. Something had to click. He just didn't know yet. Dooku, Lena, and Sifo-Dyas left the Jedi Temple for Scipio so they could begin their investigation. It wouldn't be upfront, and truthfully, it wouldn't be exciting either. Dooku was hoping he could find something out. Lena and Sifo were hopeful too. But there was little to find. Without competing powers, the intergalactic banking clans were simply too good-looking for the Republic to not begin trusting. Plus, it was a no-brainer for the Senate. The banking clan wasn't getting full access. They were just getting their foot in the door. What harm could come from that? Dooku was initially disappointed from the results that Scipio handed them. The banking clans were obviously a business, but aside from not being a sentient individual, it wasn't technically illegal, no matter how much he disagreed with their presence inside the Senate. Hopefully, and this was a big hope, the Mun banker Hego Damas II would have something going on inside of his holdings on Mygeeto. When the Jedi arrived at Mygeeto, it was beginning to snow. They discussed their plan. Of course, going in up front could be easier, but the only difference between Hego and the intergalactic bankers is that Hego wasn't supported by the Muns on a level like the banking clans. He had a lot of political leverage, but it was very much so a case of his pocketbook speaking more than he could. People loved his money. Him, not nearly as much. The Jedi moved in, finding a sewage port near the bottom side of the platform and entering. There were tall halls, and the Jedi were able to move along with relative ease. Dooku thought it'd be a good idea to split up. He told them all to keep their communication frequency open. There could be anything going on here. There was no need to engage unless absolutely necessary. Master Kastana broke off from the two of them, heading upwards. Sifo-Dyas moved along the bottom layer, and Dooku pressed towards the outer edge. The first Jedi to make any sort of contact with anything was Sifo-Dyas. He pulled his communicator out and knelt down next to a ventilation vent, having since evacuated from the sewer passageway. Pressing a record button on the communicator, Sifo listened in. Hego Damas walked into his communication room. He was speaking excitedly about something. Maybe it wasn't excitement, but he was certainly passionate about it. A couple of other individuals came into the room with him. One of them a very young Kid-Nemodian man. There were others there, all very young in their own respect, especially compared to Damask. He started by asking them for their own aspirations, and to Sifo's ears, everything sounded to be the same. Each wanted more power, more control within the Senate, but more than that, each of them wanted to become leaders of their own respective corporations. Hego informed them that he could use his power to assist them with finding that power easily. However, they needed to be extremely loyal to each other. They couldn't let competing interests get in their way. If they disagreed, then the order was to not begin targeting each other. Any corporation who wasn't involved with them wouldn't be welcome into their circle unless determined. The meeting was only a good 30 minutes long, but it entailed the beginning of an idea that Plagueis had the night before. He thought the idea of rallying corporations against the Republic from within the Republic could dismantle the entire system. So he went to each of their corporations and searched all night, finding the youngest, most impressionable, and most determined individuals. He gave them hope for power, and he wouldn't mention it again. The idea was keep them focused on a future they couldn't see yet. They would be instrumental in ripping apart the foundation of the Republic. Once they were gone, Plagueis opened up a communication and informed whoever was on the other side to start running through a series of potential life-altering casualties, if you will. Sifo was shocked, but he continued listening, as Hego Damas II told the droid to run through an algorithm on it, determine the most effective way to force each young, eager individual into a blaze of power. All Plagueis did at the end of his talk was inform them all they needn't worry about their ascent to power. He just guaranteed that it would come. His promise to them would be fulfilled. But it would take time, years of proper manipulation. If they wanted it, and wanted to keep it, then they would stay loyal to him. A man they didn't know the name of, and a man they wouldn't see for years to come. For him, it was also a good way to see if these individuals were truly worthy of assisting the Sith in their rise to power. Sifo never heard a mention of the Sith, but he got all the information deducing that there was something going on behind each and every single one of the major corporations trying to push themselves into the Republic. He got up and slipped, slamming down, creating a massive echo that blasted out of the vent, catching Damask's attention. Sifo ran quickly. He contacted the others, informing them that he had information to reveal the identity of the Sith, potentially, telling them to converge at the meetup point. However, it wouldn't be that easy. As they were making their way to the meetup location, gas filled the vents and the sewage area. To make matters worse for the Jedi, the exits were sealed off and Sentry Jones were sent down to deal with them, whoever they may be. If it weren't Jedi, this would be very successful. Dooku was able to get out first, simply due to his location, but the entire facility was being locked down, so he had to fight his way to his friends and fight their way out. The moment he got out, he noted the alarms blaring in the building. Surely this wouldn't be good. His hand was placed on his blade as he moved swiftly through the halls. Sifo-Dyas and his master were able to converge with gas blockers on their mouths and noses. They were currently fighting off drones. They were small, quick, but they also didn't have any blasters. They were terrifying too. They made super organic noises and they chomped at the Jedi. The Lene and Sifo were quick to cut them down and push through the haze in the sewers. While Dooku was running through, he felt something. It was familiar. Sort of like a dream he had, but he was unsure. He turned around and saw a number of sentry droids marching down the hallway towards him. Dooku looked back. There was more coming from the other direction. He would be surrounded. He closed his eyes. There was darkness coming towards him, but it wasn't showing itself off. That didn't make sense. He couldn't surrender. The Council would be furious, especially since he got caught. Obviously, Sifo-Dyas had the information, but still. The Jedi Master ignited his weapon and spun it in his hands, as the sentry droids raised their weapons, telling him to stand down and come with them without hostility. These droids were different than the drones in the sewers. Dooku grinned, telling them that those weren't his conditions for surrender. He thrusted his hand forward and the droids in front of him fell over. Not all of them, but enough. He spun back, blocking the first few shots that came his way. The hallway erupted into a firefight, but Dooku was the premier duelist in the Order. No one aside from Yoda had ever beaten him before. This wouldn't be a problem for him. The Jedi Master spun and weaved, pulled and thrusted. He was unstoppable in the moment. He smiled with a sense of pride each time a droid dropped. He was able to make his way over to them and cut them down before continuing his escape. The droids followed him. However, to Dooku, it seemed as if that dark presence had multiplied. There were two, but they were simply just watching. Master Dooku sped around the corner to see Sifo-Dyas and Master Kastana coming out of the sewers. They were not looking great. Even with the protectors on, they were fighting with little room to maneuver. When the drones were destroyed, they released hot oil, which either burnt the Jedi or soaked into their robes, which was just tedious to deal with. They were both tired of Megiddo, and they were ready to get back to the temple. Dooku had escaped most of the sentry droids behind him, and he told them to go. But Master Kastana stole something. She said that there was a Sith artifact. Dooku looked over to see what she was pointing at. She recognized the writing on it. It was the same type from the unknown Sith world of which the doctrine was established. Dooku told her to grab it as he twisted his blade around to make sure Sifo and her were safe in case the droids came in. When she grabbed it, the droids arrived. The three Jedi stood side by side, looking at the droids approaching them. Dooku stood in the middle with the other two flanking the sides. They backed away. Kastana said they needed to go. They all had their evidence, which was very right. They turned and did a fighting retreat. The sentry droids were marked oddly. Kastana noted it, but couldn't do much to analyze it in the moment. They were swift with their blocks as they backpedaled. Before they could get to the exit, they saw a shadow step through the smoke, one wearing dark robes, and all that could be seen were his piercing yellow eyes. They couldn't figure out if it was just an illusion or not. They were so focused on fighting off the sentry droids that they couldn't tell. Dooku told them to go. He would hold them off. Kastana turned and tripped, which was unlike her, but it was her leg being pulled out from under her. Electricity shot out from the sentry droids, and it covered the Jedi for an extensive moment. It was incredibly painful, though the attack wasn't meant to kill them. When it released, the Jedi realized they were free and moved out quickly, running from the assault and getting to their vessel before launching off-planet, back to Coruscant. They were so satisfied, as Sifo informed them about everything he heard. Dooku was locked in, but Kastana wasn't. She was running through her mind, trying to figure out why something looked so familiar to her. The armor of the sentry droids was lined with Saracen iron, which is said can only come from the usage of Sith alchemy and having access to a Sith forge. This deeply troubled her. The noise of the two younger Jedi speaking behind her became dull and just vibrating hums. It was like that for a good while until she came back, when a change in their tone caught her attention. Sifo-Dyas was trying to connect his communicator so that he could reveal the message in its entirety, but it wasn't working. This unnerved him a lot, but Dooku reassured his friend. Sifo had a great memory anyways. That wouldn't be a problem. They got Lene's attention, asking to see the artifact she had, and when she pulled it out of her satchel, it was just ashes. The plot had thickened, and it only made their case to the High Council all the more worrisome. Dooku had faith, though. His seat on the council should elicit them more room to make their case to the council, and that was their hope, at least. On Megiddo, Palpatine was trying to understand why his master wouldn't let them face the Jedi. Plagueis told his little student that attacking one of the most skilled Jedi in the Order, newest member to the High Council, and student to Grand Master Yoda wouldn't be the best case for them, now would it? Even if Palpatine was successful against Dooku, it meant the entire Order would be crawling all over Megiddo because of his inability to see a situation and internalize how he could capitalize off of it as a Sith. Palpatine was apologetic, and Plagueis was forgiving. However, if Palpatine ever hoped to be a successful Sith, he needed to understand that patience was a key to beating the Jedi. They always found a way to beat themselves, no reason to do the hard work for them. Plagueis then, of course, unveiled what he did to the evidence the Jedi collected, which helped Palpatine understand more of what he didn't yet. Inside the council chambers, Dooku, Lenne, and Sifo stood before the council, informing them of their discoveries on Megiddo and on Scipio. There wasn't anything from Scipio, but it was a proper debriefing done by Master Dooku. He wanted to make sure everything was done properly and by the books. Once they got to Megiddo, they informed the council of everything, but the real kick for the Jedi of the council was the information about the return of the Sith. From the corner of the room, Master Sunube suggested it was nearly impossible that the Sith had returned. Master Deparshin agreed. They'd been dead for a millennium, and without evidence, they couldn't prove it. Master Kastana was very dissuaded from this, but she was brought forth to speak about it. She knew much more about the Sith and the doctrine due to her studies with Master Jocasta. Kastana expressed that she saw Saracen iron on the sentry droids inside a Damask Holdings facility. It couldn't be a coincidence, right? Master Kateri expressed that even if it was Saracen iron, the council couldn't react on sheer coincidence. There needed to be definitive reasons to say something to the Republic about trusting these corporations. If there wasn't any concrete evidence, they had nothing. Master Rancisa spoke up, determining that if the council wanted to make a document recording the events of today's session, they should. However, there was nothing the council should or likely would do about this in this situation. Master Plo spoke up, confirming, suggesting that the council's mandate was to the Order and to the Republic. If they were to break that bond, they could make themselves look power-obsessive. In other words, trying to frame corporations of alignment with the Sith could make senators or even the Chancellor feel as if the Jedi were worried their influence was slipping from the Republic. Yoda finished off, apologizing, but there was nothing the Jedi could do with first-hand accounts from Megiddo. The situation was odd, no doubt, but the Jedi should be extra wary now. Hopefully Mr. Damask and his corporation wouldn't press charges against the Jedi. Because the bond between the Republic and the Jedi, they were nearly inseparable, and the Jedi were firm in their position. This is why both the Jedi and the Sith wouldn't act on anything that just happened. Hago Damask knew if that he tried to press charges, it could make him look power-hungry. He didn't have anything to prove it anyways. The Chancellor and the Senate didn't have any bad blood with the Jedi as it were anyways. To go after a longtime ally, one that was especially loyal, would make Damask Holdings look jealous per se. So Plagueis had to let it go, and he had the hope the Jedi messed up again, though he needed to be more prepared for it. Palpatine was still learning his master's game, and the Dejeric bird was reset again. Dooku was disappointed, and he truthfully thought about stepping down from his seat on the High Council, but Sifo Dyas encouraged him to stay on that seat. Plus, who else is going to bail him out when he and Master Kastana get caught? Dooku loved his friends. They were so important to him, and they made a great point. Dooku returned to his seat on the High Council, and everything remained quiet for the following 2 years. There of course would be drama from time to time, but the most important mission, the one being carried out by Master Kastana, Master Eula Braylon, and Sifo Dyas, included keeping a close eye on Plagueis. He hadn't made any mistakes and the Jedi were giving up hope, but then Master Eula got an idea. She was already a disgraced Jedi due to her son, so she figured she'd take the rat for this if it went wrong. But she hired a number of mercenaries to hunt down Hago Damask and kill him. Not on sight though. This sounded very un-Jedi-like. Surprise, surprise, it was. Sifo Dyas and Lenne didn't agree with this at all, but it was worth a shot. They followed him from each corner of the galaxy, from Megiddo to Mid-Rims galore. Plagueis had no clue the Jedi were following him, but he was incredibly intelligent. His focus on the Force and using it kept him determined to ignore Jedi activity. Initially, he assumed this wouldn't hurt him, but it did. Palpatine was also supposed to be keeping an eye out for Jedi, but Masters Kistana and Braylon were masters of secrecy. They knew how to hide their essence from anyone and everyone. They also fit right in with the public wherever they went. Same went for Sifo Dyas. They also kept their distance too, so they were never caught. The thing is, Plagueis and Sidious never talked about their plans outside of their personal vessel when it was in hyperspace, or inside of their secret lairs, wherever they might be across the stars. The only way the Jedi could track him was with insiders on Megiddo, who worked on Plagueis' ship, replacing the trackers every time he worked on it. When the mercenaries went to kill Plagueis, he was well defended. Equipped with a lightsaber, and his close friend came to help him, who also ignited a lightsaber. All of it was captured with a recording, and the Jedi left before they could ever be discovered. There was a reason they never went back to Megiddo to cut up a droid and show proof of the Saracian iron. It's because they simply vanished. Every sentry droid he used was replaced by Techno-Union battle droids. It didn't make sense, but the reality is the Jedi had to live with it. And the Jedi also never went to the homeworld because they thought there was a bigger plan at play. Though the knowledge of Hego and his friend being Sith meant only one thing. They had returned, and everything they said years prior was a plan to divide and conquer the people of the Republic. Master Eula broke off from Lena and Sifo because if she was seen with them, it would make their argument look weaker. Dooku was hopeless regarding the potential return of the Sith and finding it and destroying it. However, his last 2 years were not ineffective. He was able to garner some allies on the council, ones that didn't see eye to eye with him all the way, but agreed that there was a relationship between the Jedi and the Republic that needed to change. The relationship that determined how the Republic viewed its citizens and how the Jedi should be reaching out to the people of said Republic. There are very similar views, but they should be very stark differences. Some of the seats on the council were about to expire, such as Master Senube, who would in the coming years decide to become the lead investigative Jedi. However, he was always changing his mind on that, so it could be 1 year or 20 years, who knew. On the flip side, Master Jocasta was studying to become the Jedi Archivist, and she would likely become the lead archivist or librarian of the Jedi Archives, which would require her to surrender her seat on the council. This was important because just like the other rotational spots on the council opening up, Dooku would be either losing or gaining allies on his side. Dooku's negotiation skills won over the hearts of a few, but not everyone. His focus inside the council chambers took him away from his focus on the investigation surrounding Damask, so when Lena and Sifo came into the council chambers, he was surprised. Instead of speaking, they showed off a hologram, one depicting mercenaries attacking the good banker, until he ignited a crimson lightsaber to defend himself, choking a mercenary before his student swallowed up with a red lightsaber, cutting down a couple of other mercenaries and electrocuting the last one into a painful death. This left everyone, including Dooku, in shock. He believed highly in this theory. He just didn't expect it to be so right. This caused an uproar inside the chambers. Master Katiri silenced the room, requesting that Master Kistana and Jedi Master Sifo Dyas wait outside the council chambers until the council came to a clear conclusion on how to move forward. They of course were going to go the least exciting route possible, due to their relationship with the Senate. Yoda and Katiri took the evidence and presented it to the Chancellor. In doing so, the Chancellor and his advisors informed the Jedi that they would look over the evidence and them being Sith, and Republic laws surrounding the Sith, and then they would inform them about it. Dooku was even more displeased with this, though Sifo Dyas reminded his friend that this was all accomplished by him. However, Sifo thought it'd be a good idea for them to be ready. If the Republic was indeed to crack down on Hego Damask and the other corporations, the Sith would again run. They prepared adequately after this last hiccup. They would be diligent to do the same here. Dooku agreed, and he was very happy that his friend Sifo came up with it, because Dooku could sound somewhat more responsible for not being the one to say anything about doing this. Though all their excitement would have to wait. They'd have to wait a long time too, 2 months to be exact. The Republic and the Chancellor took their sweet time with finding the rule and acting out against it. Again, the Council defended it. And Dooku was impatient with their diligence to stand with the Chancellor. But with the news handed to them first, Dooku took a sick day for himself. A day where he and Sifo Dyas tracked Hego Damask's ship to Naboo. When they arrived, it was nighttime, but the rise of darkness could be felt. The two best friends, brothers, most people called them, went in together. Dooku and Sifo Dyas were both the same age, despite Sifo not chasing the rank of Master. They found the Sith vessel in the hangar bay, but no Sith, which was unnerving. Continuing their search, they moved forward. Sifo Dyas suggested that there was a trick these two Sith had. He'd been watching them for 2 years and knew all their patterns. He told Dooku that they typically had their hideout 3 rows and 5 houses down to the left or right. On lower mid-rim worlds below the core, it was on the right. On upper mid-rim worlds, it was on the left. Cypher raised his hand and pointed to the left with his hand. Then he paused. He couldn't remember which one was which. Dooku asked him if he had the right directions. Cypher smiled. He was just playing with him. They turned down the right corridor and counted buildings. When they got to the 5th one, they snuck around the back and looked in. The lights were off. The entire house was deathly still. Of course it was. It belonged to House Palpatine, the same house where a young boy slaughtered his entire family at the age of 10. Dooku and Cypher walked up to the wall and pressed their hands against it. Darkness was radiating from the cellar, so naturally, they crept into the ground floor level and looked for the way downstairs. The house was more deathly on the inside. Everything was covered in either sheets or dust. No one lived here, though Cypher pointed out a number of relics inside of here, warning Dooku that this place could very easily drain them of their powers while they were within its presence. The dark side was a leech, and this could make the Sith extremely powerful, especially in a duel. Dooku and Cypher opened the door to the cellar and snuck down the stairs. The sound of ancient Sith words crawled out from the basement. The closer they got, the darker it felt. There was a blue light emanating from down here too. It was also wrong. Dooku and Cypher kept close to each other, and they lowered their bodies and snuck down behind some crates. The Sith were in the middle of a ritual. The Dark Lord was in the middle of another lesson with the student. They were trying to figure out how to create life with the Force. They were nearly a decade away from being able to accomplish such a feat. But that didn't matter now. Dooku told Cypher to be wary and take cover. He reached over with his hand and crushed the altar they were working on. The 2 Sith felt the light breach their dark abyss, and such is the Force, the light shot back out the darkness in the both of them. The fire spread out and lit the cellar into a burning blue flame as the altar melted out from under their hands. A wave of force released, sending them backwards, as Dooku and Cypher rose, igniting their lightsabers from behind their crates. The 2 Sith turned, their yellow eyes being the most visible aspect about them under the haze of the blue flames. Their lightsabers blasted into ignition and they moved forward, together. Plagueis spoke into ancient dialect, giving out orders to his student, and then he split. Palpatine ran. Dooku told Cypher to go. He would hand O'Hagan a mask. Their blades spun and clashed together in the middle. While Plagueis was always the more interested in the science of the Force, he never disregarded the blade. He thrusted Dooku back. If there was anyone in the galaxy aside from Dooku's master that could beat him in lightsaber combat, it was Plagueis. Sidious climbed the stairs when he was ambushed by Cypher. Their duel took an uncomfortable start, with Cypher pushing Sidious up the high ground, but his aggressive pursuit caught Palpatine off guard. He didn't expect such from a Jedi. But Cypher wasn't an ordinary Jedi. The sound of blades clashing only masked the sound of the fires burning down the once prideful house of the political powerhouse family of Naboo. Dooku and Plagueis were interlocked in the most intense duel since the days of old. Their blades crushed together, cutting pieces of support down from under the building they were under. Dooku could see it, and so could Plagueis. It was just a matter of time and who capitalized off of it. Dooku positioned himself closer to the door, but Plagueis was quick to move around him, slashing at Dooku's back, but the young Jedi Master was quicker than that, swinging his torso down and kicking his foot backwards. Plagueis was thrown into the stairs, but raising his hands, threw Dooku into the back of the cellar, fire surrounding him as a piece of support dropped from the ceiling onto what seemed to be Dooku's body. Plagueis smiled. What a shame though, he would have made a fine Sith. No matter, he turned and walked out, watching Palpatine toil with the Jedi Knight Cypher. How pitiful. One would think Cypher would be dead by now. He was best friends with Dooku though, which meant he was sparring partners with one of the most talented, if not the most talented duelists of this era. Palpatine was throwing all of his best shots, trying his hardest to get the kill. He wanted to please his master. What better way to do it in the ashes of the place where he made his first step into pure evilness? Cypher power stepped back, blocking the young Sith, one who was 18 years younger than him, and then throwing him to the ground. Before he could finish the kill, Plagueis came into a strike. Cypher blocked behind his back, but the Force knocked him across the courtyard into a fountain. The hit hurt like nothing else. As he held his chest, he turned around to see the fires consuming Palpatine's estate. His friend was gone. How? Dooku couldn't have lost to these Sith. Were the Sith really returning? Cypher contorted his face, spinning his blade in one hand and pushing himself out of the water with the other. He looked at the Sith and moved into Form 3. It wasn't his most comfortable form, or his best, but Cypher used a mix of Form 3 and 1 just to confuse aggressive opponents when he wasn't using Form 5. He knew it would be a good buffer. He stepped out of the fountain, his boots soaked down to the brim as he engaged. Plagueis was fast like Dooku. but rough on his hits. Each strike felt heavier than the one before it, which didn't make any sense. Palpatine got to his feet to join his mentor. The Jedi Knight was surrounded, fighting with all of his strength, holding out every last hope that the light would rise to the darkness. Crimson covered his eyes, with the only glimmer of blue being his only saving grace. Sifo shoved back with all of his strength and staggered. Plagueis looked to his student and told him to finish him. From behind the Sith, Dooku spoke out, telling them that finishing it would cost them their entire religion. But it was far too late for that, wasn't it? Plagueis turned around with disgust in his eyes. He told Palpatine to finish the job this time. Sidious marched at Sifo, whose face wore a triumphant smile. They hadn't won yet, but his friend was still alive, and that was a huge morale boost. Plagueis and Dooku slammed together again, as the Sith told the Jedi that he should have stayed dead. Dooku shoved back, telling him that the Jedi would never die. Their fight wasn't over until evil was extinguished. He thrusted his blade forward, catching Plagueis off guard. The Sith pulled back, but Dooku did too. His friend needed it, as he reached out, pulling Sidious's left foot out from under him before facing Plagueis again. The buffer was really awkward, but it involved a couple of elbows to the chest or fists to the cheeks between Dooku and Plagueis. With their footing regained, it all began again. All of it leading to one moment, one that decided if the Sith could remain or if they would finally stay dead. Plagueis was so strong and talented, but thankfully, Dooku was trained by the greatest Jedi Master the Temple had ever seen. He thrusted forward, leaving an open strike. Plagueis swung. Dooku dropped his blade, throwing an elbow into Plagueis' jaw, catching the blade in his other hand, before swiping up under the Sith Lord's weapon and dragging it across his stomach. The shock was jaw-dropping. Not as much as a realization, though. Dooku's little pull against Palpatine left him unbalanced, because footwork is integral to lightsaber combat, so by the time Plagueis was finally hit, his student was on his knees with a blue lightsaber sticking out of his back. Plagueis dropped to the ground, looking at his student before everything became dark, and Dooku removed his head. Both Jedi looked to each other, panting, staggering backwards. That was as arduous as a duel could get, but they were successful. Now they'd have to clean up their mess and present it to the Council. Doing so would include taking the Sith vessel to Coruscant, a vessel outfitted with the Sith Wayfinder, a way for the Jedi to find the hidden worlds of the Sith across the galaxy. However, what was presented by Dooku and Sifo Dyas were the lightsabers created by the last of the Sith. Master Katari and Zenube would heal their crystals and reunite them with their former owners, freeing the crystals from a lifetime of servitude to the darkness. Sifo Dyas, despite not training a student to the rank of Knight, would be awarded the rank of Master for his assiduity, rigor, and his work in bringing down the Sith. Dooku also asked for a pardon so that the disgraced Jedi Master Eula Braylon could be recognized for participation in the destruction of the Sith. The Council agreed. Sifo Dyas would be the quickest Jedi Master to be brought into the ranks of the High Council, being that he received the rank and joined the Council in the following week. Shortly after the death of Plagueis and Palpatine, the Republic rescinded its openness to the corporations of the galaxy, the Chancellor determining that the Jedi were right, and that maybe there should be less corporations demanding space in the Senate that belonged to the general public. Though Dooku didn't stop there. His achievements in life wouldn't end with the destruction of the Sith, nor his ascension to the rank of Grand Master of the age of 52. His crowning achievements would be what he could inspire the Jedi to do. In the years since the High Republic, the Jedi became more dogmatic, worried about politics and politicians, and truthfully, Yoda knew this would happen when he stepped down from the Council. However, he realized something when Dooku brought back those Sith lightsabers. The Sith grew under his watch. He did his duty for several years, but as it turns out, holding office for eternity doesn't do the newest generations any good. Turns out that his greatest gift was his age, being that he could bestow generations worth of knowledge upon those with little to no knowledge. However, that should not be done with a position of power. So Yoda became a full-time instructor in the Youngling Hall of the Temple, allowing his young and vibrant student to resurrect a purpose for the Jedi. The Marauders that attacked the Republic centuries ago were dying off, and in their place were the cartels. Without the Nile, the Outer Rim was divided, and the Jedi and the Republic needed to act. Dooku's least favorite part of being Grand Master was being an ally with the Chancellor. However, he found a silver lining in it. He could use such alliance to bolster aid for the people in the Outer Rim, get rid of the lines drawn around the helpless, and push for new incentives to go out and help, to be a society that didn't forget, that didn't neglect, that didn't look away from those who needed them most. But Dooku couldn't be high and mighty about the Republic's lack of effort in the Outer Rim, so with the Jedi Order under his control, he suggested a new movement. not just restructuring and redoing the Starlight Beacon program, but bringing forth Jedi outposts once more, restarting generators on old palaces and temples, and giving life to those afraid to start their own. The galaxy was waiting for them. The Jedi were still seen as heroes and knights of the Republic, and it was their choice to bring change to the people of the galaxy. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William, 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Ban, Cullen Rooney, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewoo 670, Anikush Dank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Azavaz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny Naguin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Gunley 66, Madman Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Fortis Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The May 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash that like button. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. Sith Clone Wars out every Saturday. Let's talk about this story. Oh my gosh. Woo! Talk about a start to 2024. I've been sick for the last week, so this was a great story to write. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed writing this so much. This was so fun because I got to do an era that wasn't the prequels, and it was a little behind High Republic. I really want to start working backwards towards High Republic, Old Republic, that way. As Acolyte starts coming out, I'm learning a ton about High Republic right now, so I'm trying to incorporate that into videos just to cultivate some interest around it. I know it's a new topic, and I'm excited about it, so that's why I'm getting into it. But this was so fun because literally we get to use so many characters that just never get any use. Like, this was so cool. It was fun to include like the plot of the Jedi being more corrupt and kind of working their way there, and kind of like hint at things that were supposed to come, right? So hint at the creation of the Separatist movement and Plagueis' role in that, and even Palpatine's role in that. The difference between Palpatine and Dooku being that there's an 18-year age gap there, and Dooku is severely older than him, but also incredibly talented with a lightsaber. I wanted this trio to be very present in it, Master Kastana, Sifo Dyas, and Dooku. I thought that'd be very important for the story, and I think it made the story meld really well. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. Super fun story. I love the story. I hope you all did. This is a top 10 for me, easily. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.